All right, cool. So we'll get up and running. So welcome to the webinar. So it's titled "The H in WHS," a silicosis case study. So thankfully, we've still been able to run this event. Unfortunately, it's not at our nice little clinic in Como as we've done the last few times when Absolute Balance has assisted. But at least we still get to run as we had sort of done previously. So my name's Aaron. I work for Absolute Balance as the Health and Injury Prevention Services Manager. So my intention for tonight was to sort of facilitate a small group discussion at the end of the two speakers tonight. Unfortunately, the way situations have presented, where it's a webinar now, that's not really possible. That's perfectly fine. It means that the other two speakers get to take centre stage. So we'll still try and facilitate some discussion. So that's why we've got the Q&A section below as well as the chat function. So feel free to fire away some questions for the speakers. We'll get to them at the end and go through that. If there's any, for all the safety professionals that are logging in, it'd be great to facilitate some discussion with regards to, what you're doing in the workplace with regards to silicosis, or even thoughts on potential practices moving forward, or other sort of occupational lung diseases as well. So yeah, feel free to add some comments or your thoughts into the chat section or the question and answer section as well. So yeah, after the two speakers have presented, then we'll go through a bit of a Q&A. So feel free to ask whatever you like to an extent, I guess. So yeah, the two speakers we have, the first one that will be presenting is Ingrid Hand. So she's a director at Absolute Balance and a specialist in exercise rehab for complex workers' compensation claims. I'd strongly suggest you don't challenge her to an anatomy quiz or suggest you know more than her about exercise rehabilitation for knees. A few of our team have some traumatic memories from trying those things. So yeah, Ingrid will be first up and she'll give a bit of background into silicosis to start with. And then after that, I'll introduce you to our second speaker, who will be Ashley. So Ingrid, fire away.
Thanks, Aaron. Good evening, everybody. I hope that you're all safe and well in these somewhat interesting times. I'm just going to run you through a little bit, I suppose, of what happened when I first met Ash, and then I'll leave him to tell you his story. So obviously, silicosis and exercise aren't normally synonymous with each other. However, when I met Ash, a little bit of research had to happen and a lot of things sort of changed from my perspective. So I'll take you on sort of a bit of a historical journey of silicosis, and then I'll let Ash tell you his story. It's certainly an interesting one. So obviously silicosis has been around for quite a long time now. It's obviously been quite well documented sort of from the 1940s. And then obviously from there, it's been due to an exposure of a variety of different silica dust found in quartz, sand, stone, soil, granite, brick, cement, grout, mortar, bitumen, and engineered stone products. So quite a wide variety of things there that you're not necessarily aware that silica dust can be found in all of those. So something to be aware of just for your people out and about. Quite strangely, it's really seen a resurgence in the last few years. And given that we already know so much about it, it's been interesting to see that's what's happened. So basically what happens is the exposure occurs when the mineral particles become airborne and they're breathed in. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of high risk occupations out there. So fairly wide variety of occupations there. I'm sure you can see them all: the sandblasting, cutting, excavating, building on sandstone, demolition work, tunnelling, quarry work, and mining. That seems to be the majority of things that where this comes up in terms of your mining. Air polishing of concrete, foundry work, brick laying, stain masonry, and making of glass and ceramics. I always remember, just share a very quick story with you. Went past a construction site with Ash at a local gym actually, and there was a guy cutting tiles. And it was a really interesting, I would have walked past a person cutting tiles before and never really thought too much about it, but it was really interesting to hear Ash's perspective on it. So I suppose we are a little bit blissfully unaware of just all of the job roles that silicosis can be synonymous with. So there's actually 3 sort of clear categories when it comes to silicosis. But they've all got the same symptoms. So all of your patients, they'll present with cough, breathlessness, and tiredness. So your 3 categories, acute silicosis. This is basically develops really quickly due to a really high exposure level. All right, so basically what happens with this is the lungs are quickly filled with fluid, which causes sort of severe breathlessness. So it's quite, acute in its development, but it's also really quite acute in its progression in terms of the lungs filling with fluid quite so quickly. Accelerated silicosis, that's also associated with high exposure. And that's obviously from that fluid in the lungs, you get a rapid scarring and fibrosis. But sort of in about 10 years is when you sort of start to notice it. So it's long-term high exposure, right? But it takes a little while to develop. And then you've got your chronic silicosis. So this is the one that's most common within the system. The fibrosis occurs slower over sort of 10 to 30 years after the person's first been exposed. So once you hear a little bit about Ash's story, no doubt you'll be able to figure out which category Ash falls into. So what are people doing at the moment? Obviously exercise is what we specialise in, and it's something that not everybody generally looks to throw at silicosis as a frontline treatment. But this is what's currently the process. So silica exposure, and basically from there, there's no specific treatment, and it's just supportive care. So this basically means, people need to stop smoking. There is still obviously a large percentage of the population out there in those particular job roles that do smoke. They can use inhalers. You can be vaccinated against other infections and taking antibiotics. But many cases you see this sort of slowly progress. The lungs lose their elasticity. And in the later stages, a lot of patients find themselves on oxygen treatment, or an alternative of a lung transplant is another option that's been identified. The disease does generally progress over time. However, if you do have one of the more acute or accelerated versions of silicosis, it can massively increase the amount of fibrosis on the lungs, and then the accelerated process can occur over 4 to 5 years. And the current prediction is that across all 3 varieties of silicosis, so bear in mind we did talk about different levels of exposure and prolonged exposure, but on average about 11.5 years of your life can be reduced from the contraction of silicosis. So prevention's obviously vital, but there's a lot of things that we can do that aren't obviously identified in the current treatment plans. So exercise is definitely an option. Obviously, exercise helps people maintain their level of lung function, but just like any exercise that you prescribe to someone, it needs to be specific to their condition. So there is a few options exercise-wise, but I'm going to talk you through a little bit of the exercise that Ash commenced with me. He'll take you on his journey as to how he ended up doing exercise with me. But I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of his exercise program, being one of the first patients that I've come across that's taken to exercise as an option for his condition. So it's just like anything, it should be specific and prescribed, but there was a few key things to designing Ash's exercise program. So Ash actually ended up with 4 different exercise programs at the end of his supervised exercise sessions, but they included a variety of things. So obviously we need to know where his cardiovascular fitness is at. One of the things that is measured is lung capacity through CT scans and whatnot. So finding a measurement that met that in the gym was a key. He obviously wanted to be able to maintain his strength. You know, there is the wellness and routine aspect to attending the gym. So when your life does change and a lot of things in it are different, you know, still having your routine where you get up, you go to the gym, rather than getting up and going to work, really important. So a bit of a plan of action there. Setting some goals. We knew that the main goal of Ash's program was to maintain his current level of function. Obviously, with scarring, there's only so much that can happen in terms of maintaining function, and that was really the key goal. We didn't want to see that there was any progression of the silicosis over the time that he was completing his exercise program. Obviously, once Ash had nailed certain elements of his program, it was really important that we continued to progress his program, and obviously with a focus on the gym, wanted to give him a variety of programs. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the four programs that Ash had throughout his time spent with me. So first of all, he had a program strength. I do have to say that one of the key motivating factors is that Ash was prepared to give anything and everything a go, and he did certainly start out with certain exercises that he found difficult, but at the same time persevered, and has definitely seen him progress with those elements. We've been able to get his heart rate down doing cardiovascular based exercise, but I've also seen his output increase while doing these exercises. Then he had a bit of a high intensity interval training program, which was really good. So high area of effort and then rest. So that was his second program that he took on. Also really important, obviously, in changing the volume of air going through his lungs, high intensity and a rest, and how quickly he could recover, just to help maintain that lung function. The next program he had was a bit of a pyramid program, and this really focused on building up and moving back down through his program, so that he had a good variation of exercises there, but also he was able to obviously build up that sort of cardiovascular function through there as well. And then his last program that he had was a little bit kooky and a little bit alternative, but he took to it anyway. So the last section of his program used dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, and this is basically based around the use of your diaphragm and how your diaphragm expands to further help you through movement. So there's a lot of lying on the floor and breathing and really focusing on sort of how much air you can get into your lungs, and then that air helping you in terms of support through different movements. So that was the last element of his program. And it was great to see that throughout the time that I had Ash, when I first met him at the end of last year until early on this year, when we did retest along the way, certainly gym measurement wise, Ash actually improved a little bit, which is great. And then in terms of his ongoing health and what will happen there, we'll obviously leave that for some other health professionals to measure. But I suppose it is really key here that there's definitely things that people can be doing if motivated, and when motivated to do the right thing, to really slow the progression of this. So it's been really great journey to be a part of. Ash certainly has an interesting story, so I will hand you back across to Aaron, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about Ash.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Ingrid. We'll just be waiting a couple of minutes while Ash gets prepared with his slides and whatnot. So if anyone's got any questions, just to start with, for what Ingrid's sort of gone through, feel free to ask away, and then we can address them at the end. But yeah, Ash shouldn't be too much longer. Feel free to ask me any questions if you want. Happy to answer. But yeah, Ash, are you all ready to go?
Yep, just about to share my screen, so we'll see how we go.
All right, cool. So I'll give Ash a very brief introduction. So the second speaker is Ash. He's going to basically put us in the shoes of what it's like to be someone that was diagnosed with silicosis, particularly at such a young age. He's going to walk us through what it's like to be involved with many different stakeholders within the workers' compensation claim. And then without spoiling and ending too much, his journey to now becoming a safety professional. So I'll let you take it away, Ash.
Thanks, Aaron. Can you guys see my screen now? I wasn't sure whether this...
Yeah,
you share it, all good. No worries. I would like to firstly thank Ingrid for giving me the opportunity to share my story and for you guys to listen in this crazy sort of period. As Aaron said, I'm open and honest and can answer any questions that you can throw at me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal life, my history as a stonemason, my diagnosis, and the work cover period in the last 10 months and where I'm sort of heading with that. I am 32 years old. I've been a stonemason for 12 years. I'm married with 2 daughters who are 2 and 4. I made a few decisions in my younger days which have sort of benefited me throughout this period. I started boxing when I was 13 years old for 7 years, and I ended up at state level representing WA. I used to train 4 days a week, so I was quite fit and active when I was younger. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, which is a huge benefit, especially as I see these days. And do you smoke? And so that's great. I've never smoked a cigarette, and it's really benefited me. So I've remained active through a gym exercise program. Ingrid's been amazing recently. Always go to the beach, running, surfing, and also completed my TE Year 12, which has sort of helped me through my studies, through my Cert 4. So I started stonemasonry at 19 years old in a large manufacturing company just on the outskirts of Perth, and I was there for 9 months. And then I moved to my last employment, and I was there for 12 years. I have been in many factories throughout the years, picking up material and dropping things off. And I found that the factory that I was working in was probably one of the cleanest, well-managed factories that I've ever seen. So all the tooling was wet, pneumatic tools, air-powered, water-fed tools, and there was bridge saws, miter saws, CNC machines, all water-fed. The layout and design of the factory worked quite well. Production, everything was laid out. It's quite a large factory, and the machinery was placed so production could keep going the way it was. It was really good the way it happened. There was mechanical lifting, so we had a boom crane with suction, so it would help us lift. And there was also mechanical ventilation in the roof. There was a big whirlybird which was powered. So from an outsider point of view, a WorkSafe point of view, the factory ticked a lot of boxes. It was quite well managed and organised. So I was a stonemason, and I was a leading site installer. So I've been a leading site installer for the last 8 years. So there was me and an offsider that went to site for the last 8 years. Previous to that, I got taught by my last employer the procedures, the processes. He was very particular in the way he wanted things done, and I respected him lots. And that was great. I learned so much and passed it on to my offsiders, and they've actually moved on and started their own companies. So that's been really great. My duties, I manufactured stone, so I cut, polished, shaped, measured, and installed the stone bench tops. So the procedures in the factory were all wet, majority wet. There was not much dry cutting, little bits and pieces of shaping stone, grinding stone. Why we done it dry was you can actually visually see more specifically, more accurately of when you shape stone. When there's water on it, you know, we work to 0.5 mil, so we're very specific trade. And the procedures on site were very different because we didn't have all their machineries, the water-fed pneumatic tools. So if we went to site and something needed to be adjusted, we would get a 5-inch electric grinder, set it up on crates, and just cut what we needed to cut, drill what we needed to drill. So it was all dry procedures on site. There was one day WorkSafe made a call into our factory, and it wasn't a usual visit. He called us into the office, sat us all down, and explained the dangers of silica, how important it was, and what was happening over the East Coast the previous year. The previous year had been screened. The whole East Coast had been screened. So last year, WA started to get screened. I think they've WorkSafe have pretty much gone through all the factories right about now currently. So I still do keep in touch with the WorkSafe guy who come to visit, quite in good contact. So the WorkSafe guy representative, he come and sat down and told we had to do a mandatory X-ray screening. So we were sent for an X-ray at a medical centre. From that medical centre, we got referred to a radiologist for the screening. After that, we went home, continued work, and then the results come back. And the results were abnormal. Wasn't specific exactly in what it was. Had a brief underlying, but no specific statement as such. So I got sent to a CT scan, a HR CT scan, high resolution. That come back from the radiologist to the medical centre, and that was quite an extensive description of my lungs. When I actually seen the scans, it looked like a cotton wall had been pulled through my lungs. It really was shocking. So the results come back abnormal, and I got asked to go to the medical centre to discuss with the doctor the results. I told my wife, we had the kids looked after, and we went to the medical centre in separate cars. I left work and she left work, and we met at the medical centre, went in for the appointment, and the doctor sat us down, and just by her, the way she treated us, I knew that something was really wrong. She sat us down and told me I had silicosis and it was a terminal disease. And it was so traumatic. Everything just dropped. We were so goal-driven to where we wanted to get. Before that point, me and my wife saved hard, had the kids, just bought a brand new house. And then just our legs just got taken away from us. It really did. And we walked out of there, and I cried, my wife cried, and phoned our parents. I couldn't even drive. I called mum and dad, and my wife called her mum and dad and told us the news. So anyway, from there we got sent to find a GP. I don't really have a GP that I generally went to. I didn't really have any problems or didn't really have any checkups. So went to a GP for a referral to a respiratory specialist. So we rang up the respiratory specialist office, the secretary, and spoke to him, and she said, "Oh, well, there's a 3-month wait list to see this respiratory specialist, but send your scans through, and if it's important, he'll be in touch." So 2 hours later, I had a call from the respiratory specialist, and he says, "I've looked at your scans, and I'll see you first thing tomorrow morning." I was just like, far out. So from a 3-month waiting list, and he's going to see me tomorrow morning. So we knew it was serious, and we knew we were in for a roller coaster of a ride. So in that meeting, in that appointment the next morning, it was a Friday, and I had a whole list of questions. Me and my wife got a notepad, and we wrote down so many questions to ask. How long I'm going to live? And he couldn't really answer. Will I see 5 years, 10 years? Will I see retirement? And he just really couldn't answer. He's like, from the scans, I have to double check with my group of health professionals. So he consulted with his lung cancer professionals, specifically his radiologists. And they come to the conclusion that the scans had characteristics of silicosis. So it cleared out the other possible lung diseases. So he ordered me to stop work immediately. So I haven't worked since then. So that was May last year. From a spirometry test and a lung function test, I have a normal lung function. I can take a full breath and hold it. They do different breathing activities in this little spaceship contraption. And my oxygen transfer to my blood is fine. It's still normal. So he couldn't really give me a prognosis because this is a new generation of stonemasons with this respiratory disease. All the past literature and research were done in history, you know, so this is a brand new generation of high concentration of silica from these engineered stone benchtops. So before we left him, the next CT scan, he said, was in a year's time. So when he said that, it was sort of a relief in the fact that I knew I had at least a year to live, even though he couldn't give me a prognosis. I had a year, and that was at that time crazy to think of it, but it was a little bit of a relief. Like, well, I've got another year, my kids at least. But yeah, it's not the case. But it's just that time was so traumatic. There's so many things running through your head, and our home just got turned upside down. It really did. So yeah, from there, the insurance company didn't yet accept liability, and they sent me to their respiratory specialists for a second opinion. Their second opinion was it was silicosis. There was no two ways about it. So, and they also said it's very unusual. You have a normal lung function. The extent of your lungs and the scarring as such, and the scans, the silica's got pulled through it. People over east don't usually have a normal lung function when your lung scan comes out like this. So they said it's due to my health and fitness and activity, living an active lifestyle when I was younger. So when I was back home after these appointments, just the anxiety, I've never had any mental health issues or any problems like that, but the anxiety kicked in. I thought it was to do with the silicosis. There was a weight on my chest, a literal weight. I was lying down one night and it felt like there was a ton of bricks on my chest. And my throat was closing, hard to breathe, but went to see the doctor, concerned about it. And he reassured me that it was probably anxiety. And yeah, I'm still a bit skeptical of that. It was just so real, you know, it was strange. So was in this new house that we're in now, we've worked hard for, and then I had no job. And the whole life just got turned upside down. My wife stood up to it. She's been really amazing. She's great. She really stood up to the plate, and she went and found 3 casual jobs in 2 days to support us, which was, yeah. We had a 1-year-old at the time, and to take that away from a mum being at home so much, to work, and she's juggling these 3 casual jobs here and there, it was really put a lot of pressure and stress on us. In that time, I started researching. I was like, well, if this is it and it's progressive and there's no cure, there's no treatment, I want to know everything there is to know about it. So I started researching, and it really led to the discovery of some scary stats from history. I then contacted a Facebook group, got put onto a Facebook group called Stonemasonry Silicosis. They're a group, it's an open Facebook page. There are sufferers, guys, their wives, a support system, there is the Asbestos Disease Society have now turned it into like a silicosis support page over the East Coast. So this page is based over East. I was the only one in WA on this site at the time. And I got in contact with about a dozen of these guys, and they're about 12 months ahead of where I was. So I don't really like speaking on the page, although I could pick up, they're happy to share their phone numbers. I could pick them up, give them a call. We spoke for hours about what we're going through, and I've done this, it's crazy, and how we led up to it. So they were really supportive, and they sort of give me goals to strive for. There's nothing we can do about it. It is what it is. We've got what we've got for the rest of our lives. We need to set some goals to going in life, get your life back on track. So I started to develop a plan. I just really wanted to make a difference. So I thought the health and safety industry would be a good industry to put myself in. I thought I was up for the job. So yeah, it was hard to sleep. We'd go to bed thinking about it. We'd wake up thinking about it. Through the day, you're thinking about it. Is this the next day? You know, you just don't know what's to come. There was no prognosis. It was up and down like a roller coaster. So then insurance accepted liability, and that's when I started to build my team. I had a goal, I had a plan before I met Madison. So I went with her, had an appointment with her, and I had a whole list of things I wanted to do, goals I'd set, courses that could possibly get to where I wanted to go. So the first two courses that got approved, which was great, which was certificate 4 in WHS and first aid, just a 1-day first aid course. So I'd done the first aid course and then started my certificate 4 WHS. I was fortunate enough to have the lecturer who actually wrote the course over from Melbourne. He presented his first model of the Cert 4 to us. That's the most recent one. And he said, this model is more like a diploma and the Cert 4 put together, as there wasn't enough weight to it previously. There was, quote, you could get it on the back of a cornflakes box. So hopefully throughout this Cert 4 has given me enough to put me into a work placement and possibly a full-time career in the future. So Madison helped out heaps. She was really good. Recover have been great, all their team. We had a conference meeting with my GP. In that time, I did find another GP that specifically had great knowledge in the work cover processes. So we had an appointment with Madison and my GP, and it came to an agreement that I needed an exercise program of some description. And that's when Ingrid come on board, and we just hit it off. And I really enjoyed the process, pushing my limits, different exercise programs, nothing that I've ever done before. As you mentioned, there was full diaphragm breathing at the end, and it was really, you really had to concentrate on what you were doing, and I really enjoyed it. What's next? I'm in part 5 of 5. I have 2 incident investigation reports to write, and I'm pretty much done. Off to my next studying. I was supposed to start a work placement a few weeks ago, although all this COVID-19 has just put a hold to everybody and everything. So when all this clears, hopefully I can get a work placement and get some experience in the industry and put the theory to test. I ultimately would like to find a full-time job in the industry and want to make a difference. I want to possibly promote awareness, speaking to people. I find that as a tradesman, I can speak on a tradesman sort of a level to people, and other than my presentation skills publicly aren't that great, I want to grow there. I want to grow on that. So we'll see what happens. So that my prognosis is unknown. and I think it will be unknown for the foreseeing future. I do have my CT scan coming up in May, and we'll see if it's progressed. Hopefully, through the exercise program, I've been able to hold it off and hold it back. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hand it back to Aaron.
Oh yeah, thanks for that, Ash. That was awesome. It was really good to hear your story. So yeah, I guess while people are typing their questions, so I guess in terms of the safety side of things, is it something that you'd considered before this whole event, or was it just something that you thought of that you'd be, I guess, like to do after going through this whole process?
So it wasn't really an option before. I was set in what I was doing. I was at where I wanted to be at in stonemasonry, and I really loved my job. I really did. Just the natural sort of stone side of it, matching. Just it's an art. I was really very arty, and I found that really satisfied my creative needs. So no, it wasn't. So since I just wanted to make a difference, I thought there were so many processes that could be improved that maybe I could have a hand in the industry. So yeah.
Yeah, and is that just not just with regards to the silicosis stuff? That's just in general with the safety side of things.
In general, yeah. To start with, it was particularly with the silicosis. Obviously, throughout this Cert 4, I'm just a sponge. I can't wait to get stuck into it and learn as much as I can and gain as much experience and yeah, make a difference.
Yeah, cool. And you said WorkSafe had basically done a sweep across the country. I guess based on their findings, and you said you're still in contact with the guy that came to your site. Is that something that they're doing, I guess, on a more regular basis, or do they do it? Have they got a planned next sweep through Western Australia?
So WorkSafe has worked their way through WA, as far as I know. From now on, it is a mandatory 12-month testing for all people who work with silicosis. So that's sort of their plan to keep on top of it. As I said, the problem is it's not really regulated on site. You go bench top for a kitchen, for example, and head to site. It's because it's not a commercial site. There's no inductions. There's no pre-start meetings. There's no supervisors. You're pretty much working in your own environment in a residential home. So regulating that could be quite hard. It's really about educating these people that if you don't put these controls in place, it could really destroy your life potentially. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done.
Yeah, cool. All right, we've got a question come in from June. I think Ingrid's put up her hand to answer this one.
I just acknowledged that June sent a question. So
okay.
maybe she'll
all right.
Maybe what I'll do is
that's all right. All right. So the question, Ash, is from June. Are you currently symptomatic, and or have you ever been symptomatic?
I have minimally. When I was working with stone, I used to get really phlegmy, build up in my throat of phlegm, always go. My wife picked up on it before I got diagnosed. Like, there's a problem here. You're always doing this and trying to catch your breath. Before I started the exercise program with Ingrid, I did notice sort of aerobic exercises. I really struggled. For example, there was a kid a couple of houses down from us, and he had a little skateboard, and I jumped on the skateboard and pushed about 5 pushes down the street, and I was trying to catch my breath. So I think my fitness drops off rapidly if I don't keep on top of it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I did have a cough, which has now subsided, and not really. I do often feel actually my lungs are weighted. It's really hard to describe. I've been trying to describe it for these specialists, and they're just like, no, until I was really put it out there. And there is it feels like my lungs are weighted as such. It's a really strange feeling. It doesn't affect me at all, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully I can stay like this with a normal lung function and live a normal life, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, cool. This one's come in from Taylor. So had your workplace discussed any health risks associated with your job role prior to, I'm guessing it means WorkSafe coming in?
No, not at all. No. I didn't know the dangers of silica. We wore PPE in the fact that cutting stone was really loud, so we put earmuffs on, bits of stone flicks in your eyes, so you put safety glasses on. There was no awareness about inhalation of silica. Me personally thought that this is the oldest industry in the book, you know, stonemasonry, carving stone, and I hadn't heard about any lung diseases from it. So, you know, I didn't think twice. My employer didn't make me aware as such. So I just done what he said. On that note, I didn't do an apprenticeship, even though they didn't promote the awareness in the apprenticeship either. So I found that. I just done a traineeship. So I just learnt off my employer one-on-one. So that's how I got trained.
Yeah, cool. There's a question coming from Jason. So with your future career in safety, would you consider doing it in the stonemasonry industry, or is it too high risk and against medical advice?
There was an actual job on Seek I've recently looked at. I don't think I'd be probably the prime candidate to putting these controls in place and being a safety manager as such in the future in a stone industry, but I don't think I'd like to put myself there. I'm not sure if the doctors would sign me off and let me actually go into an industry that could start the progression of my disease. So I did see an advert on Seek, and it was exactly that. They wanted a safety manager locally to me. It was sort of ideal. It was sort of written for me, really, that wanted to put controls into place and oversee the production and manufacturing of stone. But I really don't think I want to go down that track now.
Yeah, that's fair enough, probably. There's one coming just from the chat from Steph. So have you done lung function testing post-exercise program?
No, I haven't. I've done it. Don't know the specific dates. A lung function test was quite regular because I was seeing all these different specialists. The insurance company sent me to all these different specialists to get different opinions. So every time I seen someone, I got another spirometry test. These spirometry tests are different. Some in a medical center where you can go blow in a little plastic box, and they're obviously calibrated a lot different to the actual specific little enclosed units. So I think the calibration differs a little bit, but from my records of the same machine, I haven't lost any lung function so far. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, cool. Another one's come through from June. So were you aware of silicosis and all the risks related to your occupation prior to WorkSafe coming onto site?
No, I was not. No, didn't know.
Yeah. Bill's coming with one. So what improvements do you see in the industry, given that it is mainly small to medium-sized businesses you're working in, given that you indicated that factory was well set out?
So the factory is well set out. In my opinion, there's still silica in the vapor, even though it's water-fed. The cutting, there is lots. I'll start with the water and the silica. So cutting a piece of engineered stone, the concentration is so high that the water does suppress it, but you end up getting wet. So the silica actually ends up on your shirt, on your arms, and it's wet. It's suppressed until it dries, and then it's airborne again, and then you brush it off your arms, and you're breathing it in. So you need the PPE while you're still wet cutting. Wet cutting is not enough, in my opinion. I'd like to see some testing, air monitor testing, while there is some, I have researched some, and there is some evidence on some science sites. I can't recall them, but I'd like to see firsthand some air testing around the wet cutting, see if it's within the standards for a start. And secondly, I think the standards needs to be dropped to America's rate. So currently Australian standards of silica exposure is 4 times the amount of what America have got. So we really need to catch up with the times and be on top of this, and the regulators need to make an impact. Secondly, on site, the processes need to change. If you need to modify something on site, there needs to be some water fed. There is a code of practice that states cutting of stone on site, but getting that through to people is important. And a work safe guy coming into a tradesman's factory, they just take it with a pinch of salt. Oh, it won't happen to me. It's not going to happen. So they just, yep, no worries. We'll do that. Get on site. Nobody's watching anyway. Let's cut this. It's only a little cut. Boom. You're eating that stuff with a spoon. It's really bad.
Yeah. Got one come in with regards to exercise. I guess that was where Ingrid played a big role. So what benefits did you get from your exercise program, would you say?
I got fitter for a start, and mentally I feel, my theory is, if I keep my fitness level at optimum, keep pushing them boundaries, keep getting fitter and fitter, I have to do that for the rest of my life. If this disease progresses, it's gonna, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the silica gets inside the lung nodules. It gets embedded, and the lungs try and fix it. So the lungs engulf the silica in a mucus, and it starts to scar. Because it's a carcinogenic, it doesn't go away. So the scarring gets worse and worse and worse. So what your lungs end up doing is getting stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. So your lungs don't end up contracting and expanding like they should, because it's scar tissue. I feel exercise program, for me, if I can keep that lungs expanding, and on the other scale, they're trying to reduce it, I can fight this disease through my exercise.
And you said you've got a pretty big support network on that Facebook page. Have you talked to other guys like on the East Coast, or even if there's new ones in WA, are they doing similar sort of things with exercise to I guess, manage it?
They are, although a lot of the guys over there are more progressed than I am. There's one guy in particular, and yeah, he's not very well at all, and he can't walk to the mailbox without getting out of breath. There's guys out there that can't walk a kilometre without bending over on their hands on knees. So I think I'm in a fortunate position that I have my lung function. There's so many guys out there that have PMF. So PMF is the next stage, progressive massive fibrosis, and that's pretty much lumps of stone blocks in your lungs. There's some guys out there with 6 centimetre fibrosis. So you can imagine how much of the lung space that's taken up. So yeah, there's a lot of guys out there are doing exercise, and they're trying to push their boundaries. Lucky for my boundaries, it's pretty unlimited at the minute. They have boundaries that they're trying to push. Even the guy, there's one guy in particular who runs the page. He's in his 50s, and he tries to get to the gym a couple of times a week, and he's not in the best position either. So exercise is very important, and I think it's my only sort of my only way out.
Yeah, and perhaps particularly in the early stages, to stop it progressing potentially. What's been the biggest benefit to your positive mindset? It's a question that's come in.
The benefits of my positive mindset have been my family, pretty much keeping a stable, some sort of a routine at home. So my positive mindset has rubbed off into my family. There's a lot of guys out there in the East Coast that, even there's a guy who I'm pretty close with through meeting him He's not far from where I live actually, and he's on all sorts of medications, psychotic medications, not just antidepressants. He's gone down a bad track, and he's in the same sort of stage that I am. So it affects people differently. So my positive mindset mostly benefited my family and my future, and just keep pushing these goals. I just want a routine back. I want my life back. So yeah, just keep pushing and pushing. So we'll see how we go.
Cool. So one's coming from Simone. Have you been asked to be involved in any research around exercise and silicosis?
I haven't, no. I have been asked to do a couple of media reports from the East Coast. Now we're going to fly ABC crew over here to interview me, but at that point I wasn't interested. So no, I haven't actually participated, or haven't been asked to participate, no.
Yeah. Let's see. Did you find your exercise program assisted with other areas of your recovery?
My exercise program helped me mentally. It gave me a routine. I'll try and get there whenever I can. Obviously, we're locked down now, and I've been locked down for a few days because of my lung condition, just to take awareness of it. But mentally, my exercise program has helped me too, yes. Just to form that routine and trying to get, I think I strive off routine. I need a routine. So I need to try and find it as soon as I could. So through my studies, my gym, my home life, I've been looking after my 2 daughters. My wife's still working. So yeah, I think it's really helped me mentally.
Yeah, great. Another one from June. So WorkSafe ticked the boxes when they came on site. You mentioned that there were wet methods of working PPE and ventilation. What other controls are required to prevent exposure, or were the control measures not adequately applied?
In the factory, if all the controls are used that are actually there, I don't think there's any more controls. There is sort of screenings you can put around machinery so you don't get that splash of the silica exposure in the vapor. You can fully enclose these saws, bridge saws. The bridge saws are as big as a lounge room, you know, they're 5 meters by 4 meters. So fully enclosing these could make a difference. I think disposable clothes, something you can take off, have a shower, and just leave the factory. So you haven't got that residue on yourself. Another point to make is, because everything's wet pneumatically, there's a water recycle system that I think there's an issue with that's not regulated. The grey water system is basically stacks of silica in water. So once the water goes through 3 containers, fed back into the system. So even the water that's getting pushed out of the machinery has that silica content in it. So even if it's not cutting any stone, I'll be interested to see the results of a lab of the silica content in the water.
We'll give you just a very short break, Ash, because there's one coming for Ingrid. Once Ingrid's happy to answer. How did you plan and design Ash's exercise program, Ingrid?
So I when I obviously first came across Ash's file, I I knew a little bit about silicosis, and I'd definitely come across it before. But given Ash's situation in terms of him having some fairly good lung function, I really wanted to design a program that was going to challenge Ash, so that he would be able to keep his lung function as high as possible. So obviously when you look at sort of cardiovascular exercise, the key is finding out where someone can be pushed to. So I think for me, when I first met Ash, we looked at a lot of things that he'd already tried in the gym, being physically active, and which of those activities he was really struggling with. And I think one of the keys was really, funny things like, you look at Ash and you think, fit, young guy, you know, this guy should be able to do box jumps, for example. You know, obviously you don't come across many workers' comp patients that would be capable of doing box jumps, but it was something that really gassed Ash out. So it was really a case of finding something that would challenge Ash, but at the same time, making sure that, you know, you could motivate him to do those 2 or 3 more reps. And I think that's where Ash's background, having done sport at quite an elite level, it definitely made a massive difference. I think you come across a lot of patients that wouldn't be so keen to push to do those extra 2 or 3 reps. But it was great to see that every time did those extra 2 or 3 reps, that was 2 or 3 more times that his diaphragm and his cardiovascular system had to do that little bit more to really maintain that level of lung function. I think the biggest surprise to me of Ash's program is when I first met him, we did a 3-minute step test, which is pretty standard sort of functional test of people's fitness. And I thought, you know, oh wow, this is a good result. It would be a good result for anyone's level of fitness. And I did find myself thinking, I wonder what will happen when we do this test again. You know, I thought, oh, there's not much room to move here in terms of improvements. Obviously, one of the measures for that test is where your heart rate's at. And I thought for sure that when we did this test again, I was like, oh, you know, Ash's heart rate, we'll see what's happening. Is his heart rate going to go up? Is his heart rate going to go down? And I got the shock of my life when we reassessed and Ash's heart rate had actually sort of improved, which meant his fitness was improving just because he had such great baselines. So I really set out to design an exercise program that had, you know, just that enough to challenge him, but still making sure that we could get it through an hour of exercise without gassing him out. So just making sure we had the right amount of load time and recovery time while he was exercising.
Yeah, cool. Bill's just put in a couple of comments that you might be interested in, Ash. Professor Sue Reed, well-respected expert in occupational hygiene and respiratory risk research, including silica dust at ECU. So that might be something you'd be interested in. I know you've been interested in the research side of things with silica. And then I guess along those lines, with regards to research on silicosis, everything you've been through in terms of your research, was there any information with regards to exercises, to help with symptoms that you found when you were going through, or is it something that you've just found, I guess, when you've actually been doing it, that it's helped?
Not in the cases of history, but through the support network in recent times since I've been diagnosed, I found that it's sort of like an obvious thing that wasn't really explored, as far as I know, previously, until this new generation of stonemasons appeared. So I was aware of it when I got diagnosed, like in that period. But looking back into researching, I don't think there was much that I found that really supported it. No.
Yeah. It's probably something that there'll be definitely further research into, I'm sure. Another comment from June. Does this mean stonemasons and other exposed to silica are taking dust home on their clothes that families are potentially exposed to?
Definitely, 100%, no doubt about it. And I think it's really going to be hard for people not to do that unless these control measures are really, really reinforced. So I was taking dust home on my clothes, and we was washing the clothes with other clothes, family's clothes, and in the laundry, because I didn't know it was dangerous, you shake them off, you shake the clothes off, and there's dust in the air in your laundry. You know, it's a dusty job. So yes, there's definitely people now taking silica home to their families that could be exposed.
Yeah. Another one for Ingrid. I think she's sort of answered this one, but I guess, Ingrid, aside from doing the step test, was there any other sort of testing protocols that you did initially?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that I can probably answer together. So the first one that someone's typed in is obviously about the testing protocols that we did when we first met Ash. And the second one's about DNS. I think I'll address the DNS one first. So that was obviously something that we did at the end of Ash's exercise program. You're probably a little bit unaware, but as a general member of the public, we're not really ever using our full lung capacity, and there's certainly a large residual volume of lung capacity that we don't use, ever. So DNS really focuses on the amount of expansion that you can get through your diaphragm, so that no matter what your lung volume is, you can, in theory, increase the amount of oxygen available to you, which obviously makes a massive difference in terms of your exercise. I did admittedly leave it to last in Ash's exercise program because it is a little bit kooky. Ash was set up in a gym that was super busy, and we've been cranking along for a few weeks with our testing. And then the last session that we did together, I was like, right, we're going to wind everything back, and we're going to talk about lying on the floor and breathing. And I think, Ash probably thought at that point, well, we've been going gangbusters for, a few weeks now, and Ash has told me I'm going to lie on the floor and breathe. But I think it was a really important exercise to go through with Ash, and just the amount of extra expansion that he could get through all areas of his diaphragm to really help with his breathing. So I certainly think that they, I'm sure I sent Ash home to practice them, being in the gym environment with the people looking in. It wasn't feeling quite so tough lying on the floor breathing, but definitely something that helped in Ash's recovery. So I don't know, Ash, do you want to explain a little bit more about what you found from that experience with the DNS?
It was interesting. It's very different to what I've ever done before. So there's certain movements of inhaling and exhaling. It was so different. So you have to keep your chest still and breathe through your diaphragm, through your stomach. So your stomach moves, but your chest doesn't, which is so unnatural. And we're going through movements, exhaling and moving back. And it was very, very different. Yeah. But it was great. It's something different I haven't done before. And I think my next Spiro test, I'll be able to use that to try and push more air out. So we'll see how we go.
Aaron, I'll also take this one on in terms of seeing improvement on Ash's fitness, if you like, and the indications to consider. So when I obviously came across Ash, there isn't a lot of research on what exercise is good for patients with silicosis. So I think at the moment, the key really is, understanding that elasticity of the lungs as such isn't affected so much as almost this fibrosis scarring kind of effect. So if you can get the lung volume that you have working in a good capacity, and that's what I really considered when I designed his program, was how was I going to get him to improve this without obviously also knowing what are the potential dangers and damage. And the good thing was that there's definitely no research out there to show that exercise in any way, shape or form ever damages your lung capacity. So I was pretty confident going into that. Obviously you're basing most of that around other lung conditions, but we know that exercise is pretty much the answer for just about everything in our industry. So seeing Ash's positivity really allowed me to forge on ahead. And I really took into consideration only contraindications that you see for other lung conditions, because there wasn't necessarily a lot of research out there on silicosis as such. And definitely, I think now that we've seen, that little bit of an improvement in his step test and those sorts of things, and his lifting capacity, and definitely those plyometric based exercises, now the onus kind of falls back on you, Ash, to manage where you're at and keep that same level of intensity up, and that's the key to him sort of definitely maintaining what he's got. But I'm sure that obviously, if you continue to push someone's fitness, there is also that element that potentially he could gain a little bit more fitness through, continuing to push himself hard as well.
I think you've got another one come through for you as well, Ingrid. So you're planning to share your findings with success with exercise in this setting more broadly to our industry, I guess the exercise industry.
Yeah, obviously Ash's story is fairly unique. Exercise physiology is, its own little industry, and I think it's definitely something that everyone needs to be aware of what they can and cannot do with patients. Not so much of a huge issue here, but there's obviously EPs all over Australia. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be shared with the industry so that they can let other health professionals know that exercise is something that's really positive for these people, and that exercise is a potential answer. And be that high intensity exercise like Ash was able to do, or be that dynamic neuromuscular stabilization and lying on the floor, is purely going to depend on people's level of function when they start their program.
Yeah, great. It looks like I think that's all the questions answered. So is there any final thoughts or comments from either yourself, Ingrid, or you, Ash?
I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. It's not something that I'm not comfortable doing. I've never done it before, speaking in front of people. So especially through a computer, it's a bit different sort of platform. So I appreciate you understanding that I don't speak normally. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah, I think I speak on behalf of everyone that was logged on tonight, that we really appreciate you telling your story and being so open and candid with your experience. And I'm sure everyone wishes you well with your future in the safety industry and what you plan to do, and keep up with your exercise.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to AIHS. I know these are challenging times of what people need to be able to do, and it's been very different having a virtual audience as opposed to a live audience. So thank you so much for joining in and having a chat to us. And I really hope that everyone stays safe and well.